Welcome to the Midlife Academy podcast. I'm your host, Bree Smith. On today's episode, we're turning to the intriguing world of behavioral science to explore what it can teach us about midlife. And we'll do so with the help of my guest, Tim Houlihan. Tim Houlihan is the co-founder of Behavioral Grooves, a podcast devoted to behavioral science with listeners from more than 120 countries. Tim is also the founder of Behavioral Alchemy, LLC, a strategy, training, and design consultancy that focuses the behavioral lens on a variety of corporate and pro-social, people-centric issues. Previously, Tim was the enterprise director of behavioral science at Truist Bank and a senior leader in the customer engagement and reward space, where he provided thought leadership based on, you guessed it, behavioral sciences. He is also a singer and songwriter whose storytelling style blends folk, country, and rock influences. Tim Houlihan, it's my pleasure to welcome you to the Midlife Academy podcast.
Bree, thanks so much. I'm glad to be here.
Wonderful. Well, Midlife Academy, we're always interested in career paths. You have a very interesting one I'm curious to hear about. From executive to podcaster and musician. How did you get here? Tell us about it.
Um, the very first thing that comes to my mind is luck. So I don't mean to dodge the question of what that arc looked like, but whatever circumstances I was born into and the education and intellect that I was born with, whatever kind of breaks that I got along the way, luck was the number one thing that got me to where I am today. So I have to say that. If I think about it sort of more tactically, I think about the serendipity of what it was like to go from starting out as a young guy who was selling typewriters to, literally my first job out of college was selling typewriters, which doesn't even exist anymore. And then to get to the point where I have a dream job at a large bank where I'm the enterprise director of behavioral science was something that just had a lot of twists and turns. And I think that that's not abnormal at all. It's completely normal in today's world, and maybe added for a fun part of the journey, actually, too, to get from point A to point B. I should also say that the musician thing has been a constant throughout my whole life. So that's always been sometimes more in the background, but sometimes 30 plus shows a year, 50 shows a year. So that's something that has just always kind of come and gone, but always present. So I think it's important for people to keep whatever kind of hobbies and loves that they have alive. If you love it, do it, make time for it, figure it out.
Absolutely. I'm a fellow musician with a similar kind of relationship of, it's always been there. And
Yeah.
it's been an important part of my life to always make time for it. But sometimes life gets in the way, I find,
Well, it does. It does. It might mean that I can't rehearse as much or I can't play out as much. But I hope that the other stuff that's getting in the way never sucks that out of your life. I hope for your sake that you're able to keep that flame or at least the spark going through even the most challenging of times, because I think it's worth it as a lifelong journey. And music has also informed me that it's like playing out is like being an entrepreneur. I had to go and hustle the gigs and what are the songs I'm going to write? And it's preparing presentations. I've got 2 hours worth of set material. What are the songs I'm going to play and in what order? And what are the stories I'm going to tell? And I think that those are all really wonderful life lessons. And the best part about that musician stuff is that if you're in a company presentation and you've got the executives in the room and they leave the room, they ask a question or two and then they leave the room and you either get funded or you don't, or whatever, you get some kind of single form outcome. With a live audience that's listening to your music, you get feedback after every song. Right away, did that land or didn't it? And I think that that's a wonderful experience to just remind us that some situations are really clear about getting good feedback and some situations are not.
Absolutely.
And you have to run with it. Either way, you have to just keep going.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if you could drill down a little bit to tell us about this transition from executive to what looks to me what we call a kind of portfolio career where you have a lot of different things cooking, but it looks different from the executive role. What was it like for you to make that transition?
So I think there's two things at play. One is sort of the obvious and natural unfolding of my skill set and what
Mhm.
kind of experiences did I have. But the other one is the serendipity of what might happen by just paying attention, by having some lateral thinking, by being aware of what's going on around me. And so that first part was I was interested in behavioral science. I had been doing some work in behavioral science. Uh, I had uh, I had a pretty decent resume, so I felt like I could take that uh, experience on paper and turn it into consulting opportunities and contract work.
Wow.
So that's part of it. The part that was the serendipity was the podcast. That started as a meetup in Minneapolis, and we with a partner. And at the second meetup, my partner just said, "Well, geez, Tim, you're a musician. You've got all this recording equipment. Why don't you just record it, whatever the guest speaker is going to talk about, and let's just turn it into a podcast?" And in 2017, that seemed like a perfectly ridiculous thing to say. That was just great to say okay to say yes.
Yeah.
And so
Right.
that serendipity of that crazy idea became something that now we're 8 years in and 500 plus episodes into the podcast.
Mm.
And the podcast has actually become much more interesting as a way of expanding my resume in
Mhm.
behavioral
Mhm.
science, as well as my passion for doing something I really like to do, and that's ask people questions.
Right.
I mean, I
Yeah.
wasn't a terribly good student, but I did have a college professor that I got to meet up with 20 or so years after I had him as a student. And he said, say, Tim, I have some pretty clear memories of you as a student. I'm like, oh, really? That's really
One of
great.
those students.
Yeah. He
Yeah.
said, you weren't a good student. He
Oh,
said, but you ask good questions. So
uh-huh.
I thought, well,
Yeah.
there was this
Yeah.
thread that pulled through all these years that I actually had this skill that I didn't really think about. And
Mm.
so when starting the podcast, I was like, I can take advantage of that. I can ask good questions.
Right.
And
Right.
so I've become this portfolio guy to get back to the heart of it by leveraging both the raw skills of, yeah, I've done a lot of good work in behavioral science and applying behavioral science and researching fundamental attributes of who we are, and being willing to pay attention to the serendipity that occurs in the world.
Mm-hmm. Hmm. Which is all around us. You talked about luck, and sure, it feels like some people just have extra luck, but kind of tapping into that serendipity, taking advantage. I think for some, it's taking a risk, seeing that opportunity and saying, I want to
Yeah,
go for it.
yeah.
Yeah. Hmm.
And on that idea, I wasn't betting the farm on the podcast.
Yeah. Right, right, right. Uh-huh.
It didn't
Yeah.
require a significant investment of either time or resources, financial resources. It was really just for fun to
Mhm.
start with. But it's become something that has a lot of reward for me. And because it's so rewarding for me, I think that shows. And it in fact, the podcast was maybe the primary reason why Truist Bank hired me as the enterprise director of behavioral science was
Yeah.
because of the podcast.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so
Uh-huh.
I'm glad that I played that out and continued to stick with it because not only did it provide me a lot of joy, but it also provided me with a sense of credibility.
Hmm. Right. Right.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking we might have some listeners who are tuning in and don't have the slightest idea of what we even mean by behavioral sciences. So,
Oh,
I'd
fair
love
enough.
for you to give us just like a brief, what you think it means, but then how you go about doing this kind of work.
Sure. So, an easy way to think about behavioral science is the why we do what we do.
Mm. Mhm.
That's kind of the core of it. And behavioral science springs from a couple of primary disciplines. One is economics, which is built around rational decision models and,
Mhm.
markets and pricing and supply and demand and all those kinds of things. And those are all rational decision-making models, but they bump up against human psychology because human beings aren't quite so rational
Right.
in their day to day. And so in the late 80s and early 90s, something was formed called behavioral economics, which then got merged with anthropologists got in and social psychologists got in and experimental psychologists got in and financial experts got involved, and the field expanded into what we call behavioral science to try to understand what do we do or why do we do what we do in all these different situations.
Mhm.
And then behavioral science also says, okay, if we can understand why we're doing what we're doing, are there predictable problems and errors and biases that we succumb to that we could fix or address? And so that's what I've been involved in mostly is what is it that we're doing now and what is it that we'd like to be doing, and then how to build that bridge between the
Mhm.
two.
Yeah, wow. Okay, that feels very relevant for a lot of conversations we're having on this podcast and folks I'm meeting in our Midlife Academy courses who are kind of knowing they need to take a next step, but not
Yeah.
sure, not sure what it is or how to get there. And often I'd say they feel very stuck. I'm wondering, with your insights from this thinking you've done on behavioral science, what behavioral science might offer folks that feel stuck in midlife transitions.
There are a couple of researchers, a couple by the name of Nathan and Susanna Furr, excuse me. And the Furs are really have dedicated most of their lives to try to understanding how we deal with uncertainty and how we
Mhm.
deal with getting stuck in that uncertainty. And I really love their work because they talk about uncertainty as a portal to possibility,
Mhm.
like this idea, like it's in the uncertainty that we start to embrace something new and something different, right?
Yeah.
And so it's
Mhm.
actually not a place to get stuck in. It's actually a place to start saying, this is my portal to possibility. This is the path that I can actually take to get to something new. And they talk about struggles that they have had and they see in their research of people having big challenges in front of them. And the best way to deal with big challenges is to break them down into small bits and to measure your progress and to look back over your shoulder from time to time and say, look where I was yesterday. Look where I
Mhm.
was last week. Look at
Mhm.
how many resumes I've sent out. Just take a little bit of joy, actually, in the measured progress that I've already done, rather than focusing on, I'm still not where I want to be. And so their work has been really informative to me in times in my own life when I've had that, oh man, I'm just feeling stuck. I'm just feeling like I'm not getting where I want to go. And to be reminded that uncertainty is the portal to possibility is my shibboleth, my watchword, if you will.
I love it. I love it. I've seen other places it's called the messy middle, but portal to possibility sounds like really empowering to me.
It is, isn't it?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
It-
yeah. But yeah, as you say, in that messy middle, everything's not worked out. We're still uncertain. We're still in this liminal
yeah.
space. But as you say, I like that looking back to say, like, I am taking these steps. I am making small, maybe small experiments that are, I'm
Mhm.
starting to find my way, but I'm just going to be hanging out here for a while as I explore my possibilities. Hmm.
Yeah. In fact, I don't know how long I'm going to be hanging out. And that, of course, can be a source of stress and anxiety. And of course, as soon as you say, well, don't focus on the big elephant in the room, you're going to focus on the big elephant in the room. So
Right.
it's not about trying to distract yourself away from something that all you want to do is think about. Here's the problem I'm trying to solve.
Yeah.
What you actually do, or what works best from the research perspective, is actually just to focus on the little things that you have to get done, to have that
Mhm.
to-do list. This is what I'm going to do today. And if you really engage in what needs to be done today,
Mhm.
you are more likely to spend less of your brain energy on the stress and the worry of what's not getting done or where you're not achieving exactly what you want or what you'd hoped for.
Mhm.
And yet, at the
Yeah.
very same time, you're making progress against
Mm.
that goal. You're actually working towards it. So it's a simple little trick just to focus on this is what I have to do right now. This is what I've time blocked in my calendar. This
Mm.
is my to-do list. I just need to get through that. And the
Mhm.
more effort you put into that, the less mind space you have for stress and worry and feeling stuck.
Right. Oh, that sounds incredibly helpful. What
Well, it's not easy
I
either.
know, I love that. Often we're hearing folks that just, feel like they need to solve it all and solve it all at once. And the relief that folks feel to
Yeah.
recognize that they don't have to do that. And these smaller achievements are part of the path.
What in your life was ever, what major thing was ever solved in one fell swoop?
Right.
Like,
Right.
I get the desire. Like, it's in our human condition to have the desire for stability and stasis and predictability. Those are all desires. But at the same time, we also crave novelty and variety. I lived through 12 weeks of trying to find a place to live. And my wife and I were in 12 different Airbnbs in 7 different cities.
Mm.
It was too much change. We
Yeah.
really, we didn't go about it the right way. But we also acknowledged while we were going through it, this is the time of novelty. This
Yeah.
is the time when we're experiencing all these things that are unfamiliar to us. And we're just going to get to the end of that 12 weeks and go, okay, now what?
Hmm. Hmm.
And having that deadline out there was really helpful.
Right. Right. Now, a piece of this that I think is another challenge folks encounter in these changes is shifting identity. How much our identity can be wrapped up in what we do or our career path or our identity to other family members. But we're looking to make that change. I'm curious about advice you have for someone who's, recognizing they need to let go of an old identity, but find their way to a new one and a new sense of self and what it means to make that adjustment in really even how we see ourselves.
Bree, I am so glad that you brought that up
Yeah,
because this is one of my most favorite things to think
yeah,
about.
yeah.
This whole idea that Aristotle, know thyself thing, we
Mm.
have traditionally totally misconstrued it. That we think that know thyself is some kind of universal principle. There's
Mm.
some deep
Mhm.
underlying foundation of who we are that never changes, and we're always trying to find that. And honestly, that is just a heap of dung. That
Yeah.
is just the wrong way to it is literally, I
Yeah.
don't like to be so judgmental, but it is absolutely the wrong way to think about it because who we are is constantly changing. We are
Mhm.
constantly changing. And I could think of no better example than a study that was done by Dan Gilbert at Harvard, where he asked a bunch of 20-year-olds, said, what do you think is going to change in your life between now and 29? Super predictable, right? Okay, I'm going to graduate. I might find a partner. I'm going to probably move, take a job. I got this. I understand what's going to happen. Well, the reality was when he talked to 29-year-olds, he said, what are the things that changed between the time you were 20 and 29? Their list was way more
Mhm.
intricate, of course, because
Yeah.
they'd lived through it, but it was way more varied than
Mhm.
what they had anticipated when they were 20. There
Mhm.
were not just one new job, there were multiple jobs by the time they got to 29. They lived in multiple different places. There were all kinds of changes that they could not easily anticipate when they were 20. So Gilbert thought, well, that's pretty interesting, but what would happen if we ran the same study and asked the same questions of 60-year-olds and 69-year-olds?
Mhm.
Goes to the 60-year-olds and say, what's happening? What do you anticipate happening in the next 9 years? And guess what? I'm going to be retiring, expect to maybe become a grandparent. I might move, I might downsize. They could sort of get the major building blocks right. But they didn't anticipate all the nuances, especially in the emotional stuff, like how emotional it might be to retire from a job, or the
Mhm.
emotions it might bring up to now that we've got a grandchild, we don't want to move away, or We might want to downsize, but maybe we want to make sure that we have a house that has a big bedroom for the kids, when they come to visit and things like this that they never anticipated when they were 60 years old. And I share this particular study because it reminds me that we aren't so good at anticipating the future. That's the first thing. And the second thing is that if there is this know thyself, it's it's going to break down in the real world because
Yeah.
there is so
Yeah.
much going on and so much changing in our lives, and we keep adapting with it.
Hmm.
It's not worth trying to figure out that to answer the know thyself problem on some meta mega level throughout your whole life. Know thyself now. Understand who you are now and go with your gut feel. Go with how it feels. What's striking me now?
Hmm.
What's working for me in my life now? What are the things in my life that really work and what are the things that I want to shed that aren't working right
Hmm.
now? Because in a year or 2 years or 10 years, those things are going to be different.
Aha. Aha. Right. Okay. Our values, our priorities, our motives of 20 years ago. Only
Yeah,
now.
to say, "Oh, I am exactly the same person I was when I was 19."
Mhm.
Okay, how? Show me how. How are you exactly the same? How could that be when in 19 you didn't know the things that you know now? You didn't have the experience. You didn't have the knowledge. The world was different.
Mhm.
If there is a core element to who you are, great. But you're going to be applying it and in this adapted world that we live in today. And that's the most important thing to resonate on because you're not going to make decisions like you did as a 19-year-old. You need to
Right.
make a decision as you, whatever age you are today, just
Right.
today.
Right.
So
Right.
I'm super passionate about that.
Oh, yeah.
Is what
That's
you're-
great. That's great. So, if we're always growing and who we are is changing, I'm wondering about, getting to a point in your life where you look at your social connections and you feel maybe you're outgrowing former connections or seeking new types of connections with people out there that might resonate with where you see yourself headed or new interests, new values. But I hear from a lot of folks that find that very challenging to
Mhm.
find those social connections, to find their new people
Yes.
if they're looking for maybe a career transition. Any advice or anything coming out of behavioral science for that kind of transition?
Yes. First, on the behavioral science side, we are an affiliative species. We are a cooperative, collaborative, social species. We're not Homo economicus, we are socio-economicus. We are social beings. We need
Yeah.
it. So don't give up looking for it.
Mhm.
The second thing, as a personal experience, in the last 5 years, I've had five major address changes in the last 5 years. And that's been incredibly disorienting from a social side. And uh, my personal experience is when I'm looking into new communities, I have to be really intentional
Mhm.
about where to find those.
Mhm.
That, of course, the affiliative kinds of things like, oh, I like sailing, I'm going to join a sailing club. I like music, I'm going to go out to listen to live music. Or I like golf, so I'm going to join a golf club. Those are all good things, and they can lead to good outcomes. They can lead to good social networking and what the psychologists call loose ties or weak ties. But if you're going to build really strong ties, which we need at the same time, you're going to have to dive deeper into something. And often that comes through really committing yourself to an organization or a community in a way that's more than just a participant. You actually have to take a role, get a board membership, a board position with a nonprofit or an organization or your HOA type board. You're going to have to take a position where you are actually engaged with people and they have a reason to engage with you rather than just, oh, can I be your number four in your foursome while you're going out to golf? That's fine for loose ties, but to build really stronger ties, you need a stronger engagement mechanism. So think about how you can get engaged in a community at some kind of not necessarily a leadership level, but on just a more committed level.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah, that's great. Great advice.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. I'm kind of tired of, well, just join a club
Right, right.
because joining the club isn't enough. It's good for the weak ties, but it doesn't actually help you with really strong ties. By the
Yeah.
way, it, the place where my wife and I moved here in Chapel Hill, North Carolina,
Mm.
was community based. We made this decision
Mhm.
based on
Mhm.
community because the
Yeah.
real estate people in the area said, this is a neighborhood with good community. Not
Yeah.
because they've got a
Yeah.
bridge club and a bocce club and a pickleball club and 96 different clubs to join. It's because the neighbors are actually nice to each other. They talk to each other.
Yeah.
That makes a big difference. That
Right.
has been an absolute lifesaver. Within the first 3 months of living here, we had a dozen social engagements, some of them
Yeah.
just neighbors knocking on the door and giving us a loaf of bread. Um,
Wow.
yeah,
Yeah.
wow. It
Yeah.
really
That
was.
still happens. Yeah.
It does. It
Yay.
does.
Yeah.
So if
Great.
you're going to move, think about asking your
Mhm.
real estate agent, where's the good community? And if
Yeah.
they don't know, don't
Yeah.
work with them.
Yeah.
That's
Right.
that's my thought.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah. Oh, that's great. I love it. I'd love to come back to your podcast. You describe your podcast as a community of those who are interested in applying behavioral science to their lives, and I'm curious about like an entry point if someone's just learning about behavioral sciences. Certainly, they should go listen to your podcast.
Mhm.
But I'm curious about, is this something that an amateur can just step in and learn gain some tools from behavioral science to start thinking of their lives in new ways?
Yeah, Bree, that's a really good question because behavioral science isn't clinical psychology. It's not just self-help stuff.
Mhm.
That's really not it. Behavioral sciences tends to be focused more on more aggregate change. That's a little more like sociology or like the research psychologist kind of stuff. And yet those observations can have a real positive benefit in your personal life.
Yeah.
So we have a guest, a researcher at the University of Chicago who's been a guest a couple of times, and his name is Nick Epley, and he lives in Chicago, rides the train to work, rides the train home, and he was a year or so into his work at the University of Chicago, and he was realizing, my gosh, I get on the train and everybody is not talking to each other. No one is saying hi. There's no interaction.
Yeah.
And yet we are this social species. What's the problem?
Yeah.
So he started to do it. He just asked a woman who was sitting next to him with a red hat. He said, "I like your hat. It's a nice hat." And that led to a little bit of a conversation.
Right.
And he felt better all day.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't
Hmm.
just this tiny little thing. He felt better all day.
Yeah.
So then he started doing more experiments. This became a research theme for him. And we've talked about this with Nick Epley on several podcasts. And I think his research is about changing our lives, changing the environment of our lives and the kinds of decisions we make to
Mm.
not just to overcome loneliness. It's not about that, but it's actually enhancing just the social experience that we have that
Mm.
ends up having this
Mm.
accumulative effect on everything in our lives. So I would recommend if you're curious about, well, why are people doing, or why do I do this? Like, pay
Yeah.
attention to your own life. Why do I do what I do? Why
Yeah.
do I think that when I'm driving
Mm.
and somebody passes me going crazy fast in the left lane, that they're an idiot? And that the one that I have to pass on the right, that they're just a complete joker. Like, why do I think that?
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, guess
Uh-huh.
what? There's a good reason for that. There's behavioral
Mhm.
science behind that
Yeah.
very issue.
Yeah.
And if
Mm.
you've got any amount of curiosity about why you do what you do, or why some things in your life you feel like, I wonder if they could be better. I wonder
Mm.
if I could make better decisions, whether it comes to financial or relationship or things like that. How do I approach my decision making? Listen to
Yeah.
Annie Duke. Annie Duke is a master at decision making. After all her years of poker playing, she's a master at decision making
Yeah.
and is extremely entertaining and informative. And so I feel like my life has been enhanced and amplified. All the things that I had going good have gotten better in my life because of behavioral science lessons. I'll
Wow.
say that.
Wow. Yeah.
I don't mean to sound like I'm overstating it. It sounds like I'm overstating it, but it's really not.
That's incredible. But it sounds like this kind of intentionality. And once again, small steps for folks, just
Yeah.
even finding that spare 5 minutes in your day to pause, reflect, and maybe you're thinking about an interaction that just happened and mulling over how it went. Why did I act that way? And it comes back to asking questions again, but asking ourselves questions too.
Absolutely. Intentionality is effortful, right? To actually stop back and think, well, why do I do things this way? Because we have habits, and habits dominate. Researchers indicate maybe is 80% of our life is habitual of our day to day. And so to get out of that habit is going to take some effort.
Mhm.
It's also worth asking, am I doing this because it adds meaning to my life? And in that case, it's not just a habit, it could be a ritual. There could be
Mhm.
something ritualistic and really rewarding for me to do something. I
Mhm.
love actually getting coffee ready for my wife in the morning.
Mhm.
I don't drink coffee. She
Oh,
does. But there's
yeah,
something rewarding for me, that's meaningful for me
yeah.
in just getting the coffee ready for her in the morning.
Mhm.
Now, for her, it's just like, thanks for making coffee. But
Right.
that little habit adds a little bit of meaning to my life. There are
Mhm.
also habits that just don't add meaning. And in those cases, I might ask myself, why am I doing it this way?
Mhm.
And I realize again that that is effortful to
Mhm.
ask that question. To get back to intentionality, start to separate the things that you could say, this could be better. Or even to start with, what in my life might be better?
Mhm.
And don't start with the big picture, start with small things, baby
Mhm.
steps,
Yeah,
as Richard Dreyfuss would say. Yes.
that's great. That's really great. Well, I want to bring us back to music. I'm really curious to kind of pick your
Awesome.
brain here. We talked about getting stuck. We talked about the messy middle. So I'm curious if you had to pick a theme song for someone in the middle of a messy midlife transition, what would that song be and why?
Is this a go to your grave answer? Like, if I choose this, is it no one's going to ever hear? I mean, how committed am I to this song? Can I have multiple songs?
Right? No,
Okay.
and that's a music fan where you can't settle on one. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Well,
Uh-huh.
of course, the behavioral science message around music, I have to just say that we know that most people love music that they listen to between the ages of 11 and 16 because of
Mm.
the when brain development is happening at the same time that we're
Oh,
getting these imprints.
interesting.
And so I'm going to go back to songs that I heard when I was younger because
Yeah.
those are the most important to me. And the first one that comes to mind is Elton John's I'm Still Standing,
Oh, that's good.
right?
That's
Because he wrote it in
yeah.
mid-career. He and Bernie Taupin wrote that song saying, wait a minute, I'm still relevant.
Yeah.
And I think that that's kind of a good message. At the same time, there's another old one for me, Bob Dylan's The Times They Are a Changin',
Mm.
just to remind myself that Dylan did a beautiful job of saying, wherever you're at, you're not
Mm.
done, that the sands are always shifting.
Mm.
And the best way to live your life is to actually be engaged in it and not
Mm.
to try to sit on the sidelines.
Mm.
I think that that's kind of part of it as well.
Wonderful.
God,
Wonderful. I'm
old
so glad we
songs.
got two because those both captured two really great things here.
I hope so. Again,
Yeah.
are those go to my grave kind of, I don't know if I don't know if I'd feel the same way tomorrow. Let me just say
Sure,
that it's
right,
possible.
right. You're always changing. Yes, yes. We'll check back in with you in a year and see if you have a couple others to suggest.
Possible. It's
Right.
entirely possible. Yes, it is. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I want to thank you, Tim, for joining us today on the Midlife Academy podcast. For those interested in learning more about behavioral sciences, check out Tim's podcast, Behavioral Grooves, and you can find this wherever you listen to your podcasts. To learn more about upcoming Midlife Academy courses, find other podcast episodes of ours, as well as webinars, you can head to midlife.umn.edu. Thanks for listening, everyone.